want to introduce Leslie Rassa, who's one of our wonderful alum graduates from the MFA Contemporary Performance Program, and is soon to get her next degree in the divinity program at Naropa. And I know we'll be combining performance and being a chaplain together, which will be super exciting. So Leslie's done a lot of this work, and she's going to be our host or help hosting today. So if there's any issues, she can, you want to say a little bit, Leslie, anything? Or
Sure. Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. I'm going to put my cell right now in the chat. It was also in the email that Erika sent out with the link. So if anything happens, you have technical difficulties, you can reach me just to call or text. I'm going to be letting people in here. You may have hopefully seen in the waiting room that this is being recorded, and then you heard the voice just say we're recording. And these videos will be shared. So if you are not comfortable being shared, you can feel free to turn off your video and your microphone as well. Erika's asking that you please pin her. That way, if instead of pinning her for everyone, that way she only sees herself. If you pin her, then she can see all of you. So, and does everyone know how to do that? If you go to, I'll just do it just in case, on her little box where you see Erika and Wendell, if you hover your cursor right there, there are 3 little dots. It should say mute, and then, or maybe you don't have the mute, but there's 3 little dots. If you click on those, it will say, give you an option to pin, and that means you'll be seeing them primarily on your screen.
Leslie, do you know how to do that on an iPad?
Oh, I don't. Does anyone have iPad experience?
I think what I'll do is I'll switch to speaker, and that will,
right,
when
Yeah, that
she's
should cover
speaking,
it.
yeah.
Because yeah, they'll be the ones mainly speaking, so that should cover it. Let's see. And if you would like to ask questions, feel free to unmute yourselves and just speak up. You can also pop them in the chat or pop any other, any questions related, to tech or the teachings in the chat. But you can also just feel free to unmute and ask anytime. And I think that's it. Anything else that I missed? I think we got it. All right.
thank you, Leslie. Thank you. So welcome, and Mr. Wendell Beavers is here with me, my collaborator and
unspeakable other.
Unspeakable other. So, one of the inspirations for this little mini session on the skeletal system was, in doing Wendell's class and, just knowing that some of you have been doing that as well, to just add in some information about the skeleton or that system, because it's always being referenced in the patterns. And even if you haven't been doing the class, it's information that you can use. Many of you are teachers, you're explorers, you're movement explorers. So, you can take all of this for sure, and in any way. But I just want to take a moment, because I just still in these days, I'm just so kind of amazed that we're here together. And I just wanted for us to just take a moment and just kind of breathe out, maybe look at each other and just acknowledge, like, we're here. We're here. So great. So great. And for those of you who are not here, and we'll be doing the recording later, of whom there are many, we're here with you. You're in the future, but we're with you too. Great. So I love the bones. I just woke up this morning. It's like, I love bones. And there's so much of this sense of, especially as I go through these days and these times that we're in, that I feel like I want my structure. I want my support. I want my deep, and I want my depth. And there are many qualities that come with the bones. But I've found, in these last couple of months too, that the bones themselves really offer so much of that support of depth, support, strength. And when I can feel the bones rise up and be my true architecture, I feel like, yeah, the psychophysical musculature gets a break. It's like, it gets to soften a little bit. So just in the larger sense of our world right now, skeleton, structure, bones, and we're going to go into these qualities feel for me powerful. So we have this saying in body mind centering, and I think those of you who've studied with us before know we say differentiate, articulate to integrate. So we have to separate things. And how do we separate them? By doing something with them, right? Articulating them. What can they do? What can this bone do? And then when we do that process, there's an integration, right? Then they come back into the whole, system. So we can do that with any system, is that process of, pulling apart. This is not this. This is different than this. Right? This finger is not this finger. We have to have that. Otherwise, we can't express fully what we might want to express. So we separate, we articulate, that's how we know difference. We feel it. And then in that process, there's an integration that happens. The other thing I just want to say off the bat is that, in this work, in the somatic work, there's always a sense of you're working with qualities, psychophysical qualities that are visual, emotional, the full range. So qualities of the bones are very different than the muscles, for instance. A lot of times they get mixed together. We do say the muscular skeletal system because you can't move the bones without the muscles. Right? You can't do anything without the muscles, but there's different qualities. They're very different qualities. So there's that aspect of qualities, and then there's technique. A lot of us are working to have an efficiency and a sense of, balancing support and action and all of that. And we could say it's, movement technique, physical technique. And so the more we learn about the anatomical structures and how they work, and we're building our technique so that we can do whatever we want to do with our body mind. So I just want to name that we're always kind of working with those aspects. To just touch again into the developmental process, Wendell's going to be jumping in and out at times to just kind of say and note, oh yeah, when we're doing this in the developmental movement, this is what we need. Right? This is the little prompt, that can help you. So that's this kind of collaboration, of moving together and moving in and out. So what are, qualities of the bone? Sometimes we say clarity, clearness, resiliency, articulation, deep internal support and strength through structure, and light and effortless movement. And that has to do with when we let go of some of the muscle holding, then we can find the lightness of our movement expression.
Of course, you're the only one who had access to it.
Oops, somebody is on. Okay. So if we think of in our language even, we're going to have some time before we go into specifics. We have a bunch of categories to kind of play with qualities. But what, in our language, you say, I feel it in my bones. I'm bone weary, or I feel it in my marrow, like the marrow of my being. That's the liquid center of the long bones. So many of the bones have a liquid center that already makes us go, there's a lot of aspects to the bones, right? There's this, periosteum, which covers it and gives shape and form. There's the strength of the compact bone. There's the liquid center of the long bones. And we could go into all those qualities and riff, right, for a long time. Just take off on those qualities. We're not going to spend so much time doing that today because we have all these other agendas of bringing this into movement in terms of the patterns. But just to say, in our language, you can just think for a moment, what are other ways that we use the word bones or skeleton, besides Halloween or something, that it's in our language to express the qualities of the bones. So what are bones?
Dry.
What?
Bone dry.
Bone dry, yeah, bone dry. And thank you, Sharon, because some of us, when we think of bones, we're already in the museum looking at bones, dried bones, right? And we forget that they're living structures, right? 35% of the bone is alive, 65% is not alive in the sense of living tissue, right? So they're mineral salts. This is our earth, right? So when we say we are earth, the bones are what we have that are closest to earth. It's made out of minerals, just like the earth is. And so this is our earth. And obviously they last for a long, long time. After we're gone, they're there. Okay? The minerals become part of the earth, right? So already there's a deep kind of feeling about our bones and what that would bring up or how we would feel about that. So yeah, 35% is also though alive. We have, producing the red blood cells within the marrow, and there's yellow marrow, which is full of fat cells, and there's nerves going in. Sometimes people think, oh, do bones have pain? Yes, there are nerves that go in, there are blood vessels that are going in and out. So in that sense, our bones are actually pinkish. They're not white, dried up things, they're pink. And bones are bendable, not like when we're babies, when they're super bendable, but you actually can take a bone, like any of us, our bone, and you could bend it a little bit, right? There's a little give there, subtle give within the bones themselves. And as we age, we know that, we have less fluid, and we also can lose some of the cells that produce the minerals. So that's a whole topic of, how we keep our bones healthy. But related to that is the fact that we'll be working with that bones love gravity, right? So they live for gravity. So on one hand, this is an interesting play because we want to be able to feel gravity pour through our bones, to feel that kind of, we're allowing gravity to move through. At the same time, we have other structures, and especially the muscles, right, that counteract and can bring us into lightness and into movement and are counter the pull of gravity, right? Reflexes, muscles, of course, nerves can counteract the pull of gravity. But without that, and I think sometimes, like, I know for myself, just even walking around, it's like, am I really letting gravity pour through my bones? At the same time, feeling the muscles that are supporting and moving. So we can't do anything with bones in terms of movement without muscles, right? So in that way, it's the muscular, skeletal system. So just a little body-mind centering quote from some time. Again, this goes back to these qualities that you could explore on your own at some point, that the feeling of bones is characterized by clarity of the periosteum, right? This outer skin, connective tissue around the bones, glidey, slidey, like saran wrap, right, around every bone, right? And then the strength and resilience, right? This is the strongest part of our body in terms of real strength, is in the bones, in the compact bone, right? Which are a lot of big bones or compact, partly compact bones. So there's a resiliency. Again, they're not hard, they're not brittle. They actually give, they move, right? And then in the marrow, that is a whole, I invite you on your own to go into the marrow. I know when I did this with Bonnie Cohn, we did a day, I think, in the marrow, and it was so powerful because it was like this deep feeling of, a lot of people felt exhausted, interestingly enough. It's like when we really went into the marrow, there was this feeling of like, I'm bone tired. It's like, then out of that came this vitality. So it was a very interesting journey. There was this like, and then this kind of vitality, a liquid power vitality. So I'm just giving you these seeds that you can, at some point, that might rise up in your experience to play with. How many bones in the body? 206. That's a lot of relationships. 206. And each one can relate, meaning they could initiate. Why not? They could initiate to any other bone. So I'm terrible at math, but you probably could do the math about how many relationships there could be between each bone, and making a connection, making a relationship, making a play, exploring. So that will keep us busy for years. What kind of play we can have with the relationships of bone to bone, different bones. What is a joint? A joint is a space, right? So a joint is a space. That's the space between these 206 bones. Again, mathematically, that's a lot of spaces, right? And what binds the bones together are ligaments on either side of the bone or inside the bone with a ligament. That's connective tissue, right, with some blood in it, but not a whole lot. That binds them together, has some give, right? We know we have tight ligaments, we have floppy ligaments, right? It's the kind of connective tissue there. And then many of the bones that take weight have little sacs of fluid, right? So that's our synovial fluid. Those of you who have played with the fluids, all of this kind of jiggly releasing, it's like you're activating the synovial fluid in the joints, right? And it's through movement that it gets activated. So if you don't move, it's a feedback loop. So when you move, and a lot of us do it naturally, we get up and we shake out. I've been sitting too long, we just shake it out. So we're naturally engaging the synovial fluid to create more lubrication, like lubricating those joints. So that's a little bit of kind of this overview, I guess. Again, our purpose today, these are huge topics, but is to kind of get into how are these related to some of working with movement and to developmental movement to support that. And of course, they can go in any direction. But I can't help but want to give us some time to do a guided play with the bones, right? So we get in the mood. To kind of get in the mood for a lot of the kind of basic things we'll be working with. So I hope you've got some little space there. Might not be huge, but you can find a space and trust you not to be, you can, if you can see me, great. I'll be doing it with you. Your camera can be on or off, I don't care. But we want to get in the mood to feel the bones. So I'm going to come into my space here. And I'm going to let my bones fall into a heap. I'm going to let them just fall into a heap. It's like pickup sticks. Somebody dropped the bones. They dropped the little pickup sticks. They just fell into a little heap of bones. Wherever your little heap of bones is, just feel that your heap of bones is sinking into the earth. The earth is there to support it, right? But maybe there's a little give into the earth, right? Maybe they're making little crevices in the earth or little hollows in the earth. As the bones take weight, yield. This is yielding through the bones. Feeling their weight. And at any point, you can just kind of find another heap or let the bones fall away from the center, let them fall out, away from their musculature that's been holding them. The weight of bones sinking, releasing. Earth is holding, supporting them. Including jawbone, the little bones, the hands and the feet. And as you breathe, maybe you feel how the breath itself is moving your bones. Breath is moving the bones gently. And just in your own timing, it's, moving and finding another little pile, right? Or different relationship to gravity to let your bones release. Right, so all the surfaces of bones, or a lot of the surfaces of bones, get a chance to find earth and to settle. And then for myself, and you can join me if you like, I'm going to do a little bone tracing where I'm just going to take a hand. I'm going to run it over my bones. I'm going to understand that my muscles, I might have to squeeze the muscles away from the bone so I can feel what does bone feel like underneath muscles. And I'm just going to kind of trace around any bones that I feel like, if this is random, doesn't have to be synchronous. I'm going to feel the quality of bone in my touch. And I'm going to separate it from muscle. I'm going to feel the squishy muscle. I'm going to feel a fat. I'm going to feel the density. So we're getting to feel the density through our fingers, right? I'm kind of tracing along. It's some bones, especially like the femur bone, there's a lot of muscle and fat, right? But you can feel bone under there. So we're just exploring a little bit through touch. What is the feeling of the density of the bones themselves? Again, we get in the mood, feel bone mind. And the skull is a great place, and the face is a great place, and the jaw is. All right, and so let that quality of touch become a mind-body feeling of bone. Through touch, touching yourself. Ribs are wonderful. You might even feel that quality of resiliency, especially in the ribs. It's like they really, when you press them, they kind of bounce back. Amazing. Kind of bouncy. Other bones feel so dense. Bones of the feet. 26 bones in each foot. Exploring. Pelvis, big bones, big dense bones, sits bones. And something I think I did a long time ago, but I forgot about it until this morning, is I'm going to take a bone and I'm going to sound into that bone. I'm going to go, I can especially feel that bones, of course, vibrating in my face and my skull, but I can also send that vibration, simple vibration, into any bones. You can put your mouth around a finger and into it. So yes, you'll feel your face vibrating and your jaw, but you can also feel, at least I feel like I can feel the bone itself, the vibration going into the bone. So it's another exploration of how to find especially great to do with the fingers, or if you can reach your toes, whatever. Babies do that, right? They stick their toes in their mouth and feel their bones of their feet. Jawbones, sinus areas. Just using vibration, your own vibration. Awaken them up. Right, so we woke them up from gravity and releasing, through sounding. And of course, we can also find the bones by just finding their surfaces, right? So I'm kind of sliding the surfaces of my bones on the floor to get feedback, right? If you want an image, you can have paint covering all of your bones, the surface, and want to get the paint on the floor, want to rub the paint on the floor, right? Trying to get as many bony structures as we can, top of the head, the side, right? And in your face, you might get to use your hands to kind of rub and put some paint on your face or get the paint off of your face. Spine, knees. And then what can you do with these bones, right? I like to fling them a little bit. If I fling them, I feel, and it goes through other bigger bones, right? Fling, prop and push, release, prop, push, release. That's all the ways you could play with your 206 playmates. Shaking the bones, shake them out. Rock, stack. You can keep changing surfaces of the bone, right? Really great. Find the top of the head, an area that very rarely gets compression, the top of the head, the very sides of the skull. Flinging, dropping, releasing. Levering. Or you can initiate in space, with little bones of the feet, and then the knee. You could sequence up through the bones, or start at one end, foot or fingers, and let it go into the other bones, and make a sequence that goes through. A sequence from one end to another place, bony outlet, right? Maybe toes, small bones of the leg, into the knee, into the femur bone, into the pelvis, into the rib cage, spine, neck, face, skull. Millions of possibilities. Sound is, of course, always welcome. If it's just even just expressive, or it's sounding back into the bones. They're really inviting you to see if you can keep letting go of the muscular system as an initiator. Right? Of course, it's moving your bones, but we're not initiating through that system, which is very different feeling. That is a contrast with, that's kind of a real push and pull and taffy-like feeling when we engage the muscles. And if you're curious, you could go into the muscle system, right? And feel that squishing together and that pulling apart and that lengthening and very different feel. You could let it go and go back into the bones. The bones. We learn by contrast too. So feeling when I engage in condensing and expanding the muscle system, that's a very different feeling in the body. Condensing, expanding. And then I let them go and I find my bones again. About another 2 minutes for yourself. Okay, maybe we can make our way back. Bring your sack of bones over to the camera. So yeah, any thoughts, questions, musings? Again, this is to get us in the mood. I know we didn't spend a lot of time with it, but I do want to make that that difference between muscle, right, condensing, expanding, right, engaging through my muscles and through my articular structure, shape of the bones. Like, can people feel that? That we're trying to today kind of let go of the muscle system and like, well, what were the bones? Yeah. Thoughts, questions, musings? Feel free.
I've enjoyed, with Tai Chi practice, a lot of time getting the bones in balance with the earth so that they can really take as much of the weight as possible and let the muscles relax. So I'm a little more familiar with doing that kind of thing standing up, but it was really fun to be on the ground doing that too. And also the vibrating, I found if I bit my finger a little, just enough to get my teeth to be on the bone, that I really felt the vibration a lot, having my mouth closed. I mean, I had to close my mouth around it. And then it like really kind of went up my arm a lot.
Cool.
But otherwise, I was like, when I tried to like get it to happen on my arm, I wasn't feeling it as much because I couldn't get a good bite on my bones. Anyway, sorry. That's a little experience there.
Anybody else have anything you want to add? Yeah, Wendell.
I've done this a lot, but in this though, I was shocked. I learned something, a anew again, you know. What I was feeling was that if I do touch, if I touch and I try to articulate or feel the bone, move the bone through touch, the local muscle is let go. So then I definitely had an experience of the muscle of the bone leading in a sense, because at least it's not the local muscles. And then I get a sense of the change of relationship. So the other thing was this, that it's a shocking change of relationship. I realized that I really can hang on to my bones because I'm always in transactional situations. I got to do this thing, my muscles.
Your muscles.
Yeah, my muscles hold on to my bones.
Muscles.
So when the way you instructed there, the way you gave us those images, even the change of my intention, even though I may argue with it scientifically or something, I'm changing my mind to my bones. And that starts to reorganize the relationship of bone to muscle.
Yeah.
So it can go that way, from bone to muscle.
Yeah, exactly.
Rather than muscle to bone.
Yeah, we'll do something later. We've got a very clear example of that, of exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes, Carol.
Yeah, I found actually that found a lot of power in the bones when I was trying to isolate working from there, and was able to do things with my body that previously I had been in like too much pain to do. And without thinking, when I found the ground through my bone, the rest of my body freed up. And it was maybe the first time ever that I've had that sensation of being, you know, grounded to the bone. And it was very freeing.
Yeah. No, I found that too. We're just so habituated to the muscles. We don't even know it. You know, I mean, it's psychophysical. It's a lot of things why we're, you know, holding on there. So yeah, it's incredibly freeing. That's why I said I love the bones, because I can find freedom of things that I wouldn't dare do if I was in my muscles. Interesting, right? You know, hopefully the muscles are there to support, but yes. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So we're going to kind of dive, and we will take a break, like a 10-minute break, about halfway through there. But I want to talk about this one. I wrote a couple of things of little areas we go into, and one is distinguishing the appendicular skeleton from the axial skeleton. And there's good reasons for that, for us to distinguish it. So Leslie, maybe you could just put on and screen share it's just from the anatomy coloring book basically, but it shows you very clearly right away, you see the difference. So if you could do that, Leslie, that would be great. Right, so the dark is the appendicular skeleton, and the white, the rest of that, is the axial. So the axial is like where they consider most of the weight and all of that is moving through the central axis, or the axial skeleton. Head, spine, continuing down. We think of it as part of the pelvis, but it's not, it's the spine, right? The sacrum, and then the tail at the bottom. We also have Mr. Skelly here, which after we look at the pictures, we can look at Mr. Skelly. So that's our kind of central core place of strength and support, really. And then the appendicular skeleton is the black, which is you see front and back, the scapula, the whole sternal yoke there, the arms, and the two pelvic halves, right? And the legs. Now, in a lot of somatic work and in kind of body-mind centering for sure, the ribs are considered part of the appendicular skeleton. So think of that for a minute, why that would be. So these are the appendages, right? You got your core and you have the appendages. Well, the ribs move. I mean, they move separately. Each rib moves individually like little fish things, right? I mean, they're all separate and movable. So it could be helpful to think of them as part of the appendicular, as literally appendages, and not just something we're holding in our axial line. Okay, so that's the reasoning for that. But I want to give you the traditional is the picture you see there. Then in body mind centering and other somatic techniques, we would add the ribs as having the ability to move, right? And to be appendages like the arms for the hands, right? We do that, and that would also bring us into a different mind. You know, if we can really articulate through the ribs, right? And articulate, so here's, you know, the developmental, we could articulate all the ribs on the right side to fold over towards, right? All the ribs on the other side. So it's not a whole thing, right? But there's a half, right, that they could move there, they could articulate. And we're going to talk a lot more too about the pelvis as well, that there's an articulation at those joints. So I want to say one thing about developmental movement and development is that we develop distal to proximal. In other words, for a little baby, right, has very little proximal strength, and it reaches with its hands and it pushes with its hands, and it reaches with its feet, it pushes with its feet, and it reaches with its tail, and it pushes with its tail, pelvic floor, it reaches with its mouth, rooting. Those are distal, right? Distal to this proximal body, right? Closer in is proximal, further out is distal. It's all relative, right? This is proximal to this, right? This finger is proximal to this bone. I mean, distal to this bone. So it's a relative situation, but we develop first from our distal, and then the proximal comes into being. So this is really important in the developmental movement because we're trying, in many ways, we've reversed that as we've, you know, we grew up and then we start doing everything. A lot of us are moving very much from the proximal body. And we're less familiar with really letting the initiation come from these endpoints. We think of the patterns, the developmental patterns, navel radiation, right? We have a proximal navel. This is one of our first patterns. In utero, we're attached to the navel through the umbilical cord, and our limbs are radiating out, right? But in utero, you know, the hands are brushing against the inside of the womb, right? And sucking your thumb, reaching with the head, reaching with the tail, right? So all of our distal limbs at the end points are very active. So that's this relationship between the distal ends, which are trying to kind of reignite to work through from the ground up. Like, where did we come from? We came from a lot of distal feeling and initiation. And of course, you know, wearing shoes and all of that, we've lost some of that, the reflexes in the hands and the feet, right? Well, especially the feet to be active, and mouth too. This is our way of moving, was from the mouth, not from the neck back here, but from the mouth. This is going to relate to a lot of cues that Wendell gives you in the developmental work, right? How to find the mouth and the tongue and working with that. So in terms of this kind of setup, actually, Leslie, why don't you go to the next picture? Let's see. Is that the next one? Okay, the pelvis, yeah. I just want you to see that, and I'm going to show Mr. Skelly too. Well, actually, we can't do it both. We're sharing the screen here, but I really want you to see there's two halves. And the thing I want to impress today, because I didn't learn this till actually fairly recently, I have to confess, I knew it, but I didn't feel it in my body, is that there is movement at, you know, there's the pubic symphysis that's in the front, right? Leslie, you can even take the little cursor and put it on the pubic symphysis. You know, move your, yeah, to the front there. That's a joint, right? So, and it's jointed, of course, in the back to the sacrum, right? That's the sacroiliac joints. And here again, you see another picture of the front, and then you see the back. right? And that's going to the sits bones. So the point being that we can move this half of the pelvis, right? A little bit, not like this, of course, but we can initiate some movement. Not only, a lot of us are used to saying, oh yes, I know the back. Yes, I know I can initiate at the sacroiliac joint here, but we can initiate at the front. And I found this is amazingly helpful in terms of just basic technique and balance. Because what we would like to do is to free the spine and free the axial skeleton from doing all the stuff, right? That should be free, you know, from top to bottom. If you keep going, Leslie, there's a picture of the spine. Next, whatever. Yeah, not on that row. You have to go to another scan.
I don't know that I have it.
Oh, maybe. You don't have
These
that
are
one?
usually two that I have in that file.
Okay. Okay. There was another file I sent, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry, I missed it.
That's okay. Can I hold it up to the camera? Yes, but yeah, there you go. Right. Can you see that? Yeah. So that's the full spine going down to the tail. Right. So that's the axial skeleton, and of course, then going up with the skull. Right. So when you stay there for a moment too, and you can put it up a little bit higher. Yeah, that's it. So you really see the tail at the bottom. Yeah. See,
There it is.
There we go. There we go. Thanks. There you go. Good. Good. So that's the axial. Then you've got the two pelvic halves, which are part of the appendicular. They're movable, right? We can move from the front and the back, and we can glide like this, and we can move like this. So we want to try that and feel that out. So since we got the picture there, I'm sure a lot of you know this already, but I just want you to make sure you realize that, you know, the tail, right, at the very bottom there, the coccyx is about 4 to 5 fused bones, but there's a joint there, right? So Leslie, you could put your cursor on the joint between the sacrum, right, and the tail, and that there are reflexes, anal rooting, right? We talked about that some of you have done that work. So that is a reflex that tail moves, right? And there's a reflex that allows it to move, right? And to initiate movement. And it's really low down, right? If you put your fingers, you know, you can feel the sacrum. If you go further, you can really feel where it curves under. And that's a separate joint there. That's the pelvic floor that Wendell's always talking about, right? So you can reach with your tail. Tail can come under. It's the pelvic floor that's doing that. Maybe even take a moment for yourself and just feel like if you put your fingers there, that you could extend the tail, then you could bring the tail under. You could extend the tail, you could bring it under. It's the pelvic floor that's doing that. And if you want, you could let it go through the whole spine. Tail releases out, takes the spine. It's a spinal pattern. Tail comes under, takes the spine to the head. Tail reaches out and away and takes the spine. Just to feel it and be clear about it, starting very low as a reflex down there, right? An actual reflexive ability. The other thing, now that we're up here at the top, you can see the skull, right? And so if you look at the very top of the spine, you'll see that, you know, it's pretty much in line with where your TMJs are, right? So take your jaw, go side to side, right? When you put your fingers right on TMJ and you made like a line here, that's where the skull is sitting, right? That's the skull sitting on two little condyles, right? That's the atlas, the atlas, and the skull is sitting on there. So just rock your condyles. So we're not in the neck at all. We're right at the very top of the spine, the very top of the spine, right? So yeah, rather than here, right? Then we're down here. So we're going way up. Right, so then put your hands, as Wendell was having you do sometimes, put your hands behind on your occiput here, and your other thumbs in your jaw, your TMJ, and lift your skull up and over. Feel the roundness and the curve, right? The roundness. And then you're going to open your mouth, not by moving your jaw, but letting this is a double dome. There's a dome in here, and there's a dome there. You're going to go. And go up and over, and you're going to open your mouth by bringing your skull away from your jaw, not your jaw away from your skull. Up and over. Eyes have to go. Homologous. Spinal and homologous. Right, up and over. That's different than doing it from here, right? It's a different feeling. This is really getting this lift up and over, and then we can come back by lifting that dome inside and going away. We can keep going back. We can go back, and then we can go up and over. So we're throwing out a lot of things here, and then we're going to get to play. Yeah, so that's one of this important, I think, movements to feel that quality. So we really get the sense of our skull being pretty high up there. Leslie, could you go once more, see what else is on there? Yeah, that's just showing, yeah, that's clear. That's the ribs. Another picture of the pelvis. There you can say in the pelvis, you can really see the gap. You can really see the gap in the front, proving it's a joint, the pubic symphysis. There's a gap there. That means there's a joint, and those two bones can move separately. Is there anything else below, or is that it? Yeah, that's it. Okay, great. Thanks, Leslie. You can unscreen share. Yeah, and I'll just get up close here, just so you can see, right? Give you a little more sense of, right, the two halves in the back and the two halves in the front. This is where we're talking about that we want to feel that these can move, right? There's some movement there, right? Because we have a tendency to just have this as a big block, big thing, just like the rib cage, a big block. We're trying to separate these parts out for support and articulation. And here we're talking about, you know, way up here, right? This over curve. And it's possible to open the mouth without moving the jaw. When a baby is nursing, especially with the breast, that's what they're doing. They're going up and over, up and over, up and over. With the bottle, it's a little bit more. And so you think about that, that's, you know, going through our whole spinal, exercising our spine, the cerebral spinal fluid that's coming through the spinal cord. This action is really activating that, right? Really sending that fluid up and down and helping that, rather than howdy doody. In my day, it was howdy doody, the jaw, right? So we're trying to find that connection. Wendell, do you want to throw in there just about kind of some of the movements that you've been doing to that?
I think
Or that's pretty clear.
Pretty good. Well, it'll come up. It'll come up. Yeah, I think it'll come up. Let me just think a second.
Yeah.
I mean, we've done this a lot in developmental class, where we've tried to find this little, that there's a relationship to the front, which is the skull resting on the TMJ, in this TMJ joint on the jaw. But it's also has a resting articulating surface in the back, but it's really back center, which is where the occipital, where the condyles, it's sliding. So it slides under when you open, and then it comes
Goes
back.
up and over. So it's really following the shape of the skull, and then it elongates through the back rather than we're here. right? We all, know this. We get stuck in the neck and the shoulders and the whole thing. We're trying to really find that lift. And so it lifts, if we're standing, it lifts the body, right? It lifts the body. And I know you've done a lot of these things, through here of, going like, up and over through the spine, skull is going out, right? And then tail, whatever we have, up and over. And then we go back, rather than here, we're going to feel this away. I'm going to go up and over.
One of the things about this articulation and thinking about the mouth's presence also is it releases the front of the spine. So when you go over, there's a softening through the spine, and it gives us way more articulation through the front, which is what really gives us a lot of more range. So that's the other thing that's going on.
Yeah. So the other end of that is the tail. So, and then the tail. So does the mouth pull the tail? Do they go towards each other? Do they both go away? Does one pull through? That's the spinal pattern. We're talking developmentally. That's the spinal pattern. Let's take a moment so we can do it, not just be blabbing about it. So in your space, right? In your space. I'm gonna go on my side. I'm gonna go on my side, and you can suck your thumb or not. One of the ways you find this is like literally sucking your thumb, because you can go up and over. Whether you suck your thumb or not, I'm gonna, you're gonna bring your skull up and over towards the front of your tail. But this is distal initiated. I'm not initiating from my core. I'm initiating from my skull and my tail. And then I'm going to release tail, go through my spine, through. I could go into extension if I wanted. Then I'm going to go up and over, Tail through the spine, all the way up and back. Up, and I can take my hand, I go up and over. I can start on the top again. I can go skull going away from the mouth, going down to the spine, going to the tail. I could go into extension if I wanted to. I could bring both of them up and over and towards each other. Right, so there's a play there between that. I could roll onto my back. I could put my hands, my thumbs on my TMJs. My other fingers resting on my occipits. And I could lift my skull up and over, and I could follow it down through my spine, folding towards the front of my tail. Breathe it. I can start with my tail. Tail releases down. Right, so I'm just sequencing through the front of the spine, ending up. I could go further here. I could go into extension, right? So the condyles, right? The bottom of the skull going up and over to go down towards my tail. Now I'm extending. Feeling the front of the spine opening. I'm going to take again. I'm going to go up and over, coming through, folding through the spine. Right? Take a moment to feel whatever you'd like to do with that kind of relationship. Right? Another place to do it, of course, is coming from feet to tail, through the front of the spine, right, to the back space. I'm going to go into a little extension. I'm supporting my skull, feeling my tail, right, they're coming towards each other in the back. And then the skull is going to come up and over, right, and I'm going to bring them both apart and together. Right? So just whatever combinations you like to do, whatever you like to play with that connection, and really finding that jaw thing, that double dome curve, the dome on the inside of the mouth, the dome of the back of the skull.
Talked about this in class of bringing the head tail together. They come together, they go apart, and this is the C curve.
The C curve.
Right, this is the
famous
sagittal C curve.
Sagittal C curve.
They go out and over and down and under,
Right.
and then they open and they go apart. And that's how we're organizing all that homologous movement. we
Yeah,
do.
that's homologous, right? Together and apart, right? Those right, together and apart.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, that's it, right?
Yeah,
And really finding connect, because it's right where the jaw is at that point. That's where the skull is sitting on the spine. That's the connection. That's the connection right there.
so this is underlying when we go into really homologous movement where it radiates out into the appendicular. I get them mixed up.
Yeah, into the
Yeah, it goes all the way out into the hands and feet, but we're just, this is what's underlying it, which is sometimes we have trouble getting to in developmental class a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, yes, we can explore that for a long time, but I want to, before we go, just checking the time here. No, we're good. I want to give the clarity of the pelvis there. So what we're going to do is we're going to do it down first, and we'll come to standing. But again, it's understand that there's a joint there. We're going to go. We're just going to. Some of you have done this before. We're going to go through these various joints. So I'm going to bring one. You can watch for a second. I'm going to go through these joints. I'm going to feel like this half of my pelvis is going to fold here, because that's the first joint. That joint, then my femur bone, then my sacroiliac joint, where my sacrum joins my pelvis, then to the other side, the opposite, right? Right. So then I'm bringing this across. Then I'm rolling onto, I'm finding where the femur bone is in the socket, right? And then into this half, other half of the pelvis. And maybe I'll just keep going, okay? Now I'm gonna roll. So I'm gonna bring this half of the pelvis around at the front. Then I'm gonna bring the leg. Then I'm gonna bring I'm gonna bring it the sacroiliac joint. Not even gonna kill anymore. So I just did a roll through, what is that? That's like 10 joints? I'm not sure. That's because I'm going pubic bone, pubic symphysis, hip socket, hip joint, sacroiliac joint, opposite sacroiliac joint, opposite pelvic half, leg, or it could be leg pelvic half. And I'm going to keep going. So I'm moving through, or trying to articulate those and individuate those joints. Okay, if you're not clear about it, you can ask a question or just try it. Right, so there's a lot of joints there. You're trying to, rather than use the pelvis as one thing, you're trying to visualize it. You know, there's a lot of joints there. And you're going to move by countering, right? As we do everything together, there's no counter, by taking one joint at a time. Right, kind of moving through one joint at a time. Of course, you always have choices whether to go from the front to the back or the back to the front. Because again, in our focus, I would be great if we could get more of the action happening in the front of the pelvis at the pubic symphysis, rather than thinking or focusing all on the back of the sacroiliac joints. But again, we're trying to separate them. This is movement. It could be homolateral, right? It could be contralateral, depending. So if you can riff off of that, at any point, riff off of that by staying with your awareness way more, you have to go through all those millions of joints, right? So just say that your focus is going to be on initiating from the front of the pubic symphysis, initiating from the pubic symphysis, initiating from the, right, and come all the way up, initiating from the pubic symphysis, right, initiating from the front, not the back. Two halves. Yeah, and just see what you can do with that. And you can play with, you know, front, 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 front. Right, and it can open to the back. It can come to the front. Get open to the back. And we're working this area here. It's fine for it just to be an image, right? Image comes first, and then it sparks something, a change. It's subtle. There's not a lot of movement, but the image changes the way you use your pelvis. The two halves. Maybe you want to add, you know, front, back. Lots of variations.
Hmm.
Mhm. 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 Yeah, it's just like shifting your awareness to the front joint.
It's okay to talk about the parents just a little bit. So, you know, in terms of the patterns again, just so many of you have been working with the patterns, that one of the things that's happening without this articulation, it's really hard to find true rotation in homolateral, because we've been it's very hard to find true rotation in the homolateral movement, where we've been describing it as half of the pelvis, half of the rib cage, and half of the skull. That's the hat, right? So when we're doing the rolling, you know, when we're doing our rolling, we're really practicing bringing the half of the pelvis and the half of the rib cage and the half of the skull together. So if we can't articulate them, we're really not going to get the full range of movement in any homolateral condition. What was showing up there, though, a lot, because Erika was focusing on the pelvis first, then that's underlying, right? That's underlying all of that work that's really heading towards spiral. So that's the next step, but this is the next pattern, spiral. So you would have to be able to identify and work through the halves of the pelvis that go first, if we're going from the pelvis to the head. Pelvis, rib cage, head. We talked about a lot in class, and so we're working with the axial skeleton is super important underneath there, that we know how to reach with the head, which we've talked about a lot, how to reach with the head and differentiate it from the rib cage.
And right here, you have your appendicular skeleton of your ribs, right? Here they were, the ribs. Now these ribs are going to open and these ribs are going to close. These ribs are going to close. Those ribs are going to close. It's not one thing. So the same way, if you take to heart this, you know, appendage thing, the we've got this pelvic halves. We also have the ribs moving and changing. And that is hard for a lot, I'll admit it. We just have a thing here. So when once you do it again, and and fun to play with that a little bit, play with the spiral, that, and I'll
Yeah.
right, and take it from the front.
Yeah, so in class, I've always been saying I'm using this broader language of going leg, half the pelvis, right? Other half, rib cage.
Rib cage. And of course, the skull is there.
So if I'm going to go through the whole articulation, I would be going half. So I'm going half of the pelvis articulated, rib cage 2 halves,
To head.
head 2 halves. Pelvis.
I have a question. If
Yeah.
you were to, when you say pelvis, what joint are you thinking when you say pelvis?
Yeah, well, in this, what we're trying to do here is to make it rather than just the whole pelvis, that pelvic half, and I've been encouraging to fold it at the front, right?
At
At
pubic symphysis.
At the pubic symphysis. So yeah, bring this way. Right. So in actuality, it's this half that comes first, then it's the leg. Right? Because the pubic symphysis is in this front here, and the
Right.
leg here is after. So it's pelvic half, leg, right? Half of the rib cage, skull, right? And then play with how articulating you want to make that. Yeah.
Right.
Does that help? Come on, that.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, questions, musings?
So homolateral, we would be lining up the halves and they go together right side, left side.
Right.
Contralateral, we are the beginning of spiral, we're going to let them separate, but we really have to work with it's really complicated in a sense because it's the 2 halves go half, half, half and half. So there's 6 halves
That's right.
that are connecting up, right? But it's pelvis, so when we're spiraling, it's pelvis first, then half and half of the rib cage, then I'm thinking half and half of the skull, and away it goes. So,
If we could play for a moment with this, starting from the ground and going up and keeping it when we're up, right? So we've got, this is what we're doing here, we've got, pelvis, leg, rib cage, my rib cage is gonna come under, my skull, my head, my rib cage. Get back to your side, right? My pelvis, other half of the pelvis, rib cage, skull, rib cage, pelvis. Can you play with the halves, right? Either homolaterally or contralaterally. It just means one or the other leads. Take a moment to see if you can
so you can change levels.
change levels through those halves. Do levels through the halves.
You do it this way.
Yeah. Oh, half. Yeah, it's a little scary sometimes, but if you really get your front of your pelvis going, it helps a lot.
Rib cage next and then maybe you should feel that rotation. That's so forgot to do with class. Just, just walk it side to side and track it on the skull.
Selena.
Yeah, I remember in the MFA we talked about this sort of spiralic way of going from floor to seated like this. I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk through that in a little more detail.
I'm not sure.
Wendell says he knows.
I'm going to try everything correctly. We're talking about changing levels from this place, going down and going up, right?
Ah.
Yeah. So, let's see how we're going to do it. This is one of both cameras. Well, one of the things that's going on here is that when we're talking about this, Erika, correct me if I'm wrong, that we're talking about this axial skeletal initiation, which is a little different than how I've been teaching class a little bit, where I've been going from the distal because we haven't got out there yet, right? So, but if I'm just taking it from the axial skeleton first, I would be going head, I'm going to get my support in my hands, rib cage, half pelvis, half pelvis. I'm going to come up. I'm going to need my support pushing all of that, right? So I need my appendicular support, but I'm going to come back, half the pelvis. And I've been teaching it through, you have to go fully through the rib cage. It has to go through the side curve of the rib cage to come up. I'm going to come up higher by going skull, rib cage, pelvis, right? Half the pelvis, head, right? And I'm going to go back from here, maybe. Go back from here. So, but maybe it's a little confusing because we're not, and we've probably taught it a lot this way where I'm using the distal first. So so I've been talking about hand, head, rib cage, pelvis. Foot, half the pelvis, half the pelvis. So I sit down now.
Yeah, and of course the distal is complete to support you, but we're just.
So it's radiating out of the proximal.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
They go apart and they come together.
Yeah, and then right now we're like, these block kind of areas trying to loosen them up, right? But of course, the distal is also part of this whole support system. And we said we developed distally first. We need all of this support. We're gonna get to that. Let's do one more thing before we take a break, which is very simple. It's like body half roll, it's just a homolateral, right? Because where we can just kind of bring in the visualization and the feeling of, two halves, right? So, we can have, there's one half of the skull, one half of the pelvis, right? One half of the ribcage, pelvis. And so we're going to go different ways, but want to do this one, and then we're going across. We open one half of the skull, rib cage, pelvis, other half of the skull, rib cage, pelvis.
Another way to track, a good way to track is to draw a line around the curvature of the pelvis, curvature of the rib cage, curvature of the head. This is integrating the half of the skull, half of the rib cage.
Half the skull, half the rib cage, half of the pelvis.
So it's really
homolateral.
Yes,
Two
homolateral.
halves.
Sorry.
So you're kind of organizing them now as three areas and trying to synchronize them in a way. And so you're really feeling the architecture, right, of the shape of those three halves and syncing them up. So it's not a spiral, it's not contralateral, it's homolateral. Homolateral means one half, another half. One half, another half. Right. One half, another half. That's it. Right. Yeah, and then you let your mind range down through. Am I actually finding the joints? Am I finding even some give in the ribs? Am I finding some sense of folding the ribs, opening the ribs, folding at the pubic bone, opening at the pubic bone? Right, just feeling a kind of a line in the middle of your skull and knowing there's two halves. Those joints don't move very much, but we can image. We have two halves of the skull. There is a central line through there. So, just to finish, can you come up? Right? Can you come up? Through this. Yes. No. Essentially, if you come all the way up, right? You come all the way up, right? At your side. And it's trying to stay in homolateral, so you could go.
You have to push it to your side.
Push up to the side.
Pelvis ribcage.
Pelvis, ribcage, head. Head, ribcage, pelvis, we're into a spiral. Pelvis, ribcage, head. Right, could we have a half, but moving from the pubic bone and ribs, pubic bone and one half of the skull, pubic bone, one half of the skull. Just finding that homolateral walk. Find the front here. Like walking from the front rather than from the back, from the front. I'm just doing it homolaterally.
It's all about rotation,
Rotation,
not sliding.
rotation, rotation. Two halves rotate. Can you, rather than swing all the hips around, right? Can you feel like, oh, I've got a little bit of folding, a little bit of fold. It's subtle, a little bit of folding, a little bit of folding. Activating here.
So I have a question. I love that, moving from the front, from that symphysis joint. So then if you would go from there, and now let's move from the back and kind of go back and forth. So we'd move from the back, we'd move from the sacral iliac.
Yeah.
That would be the thought.
Sacral
The
iliac.
two joints.
Yeah,
the two
SI
joints
joint.
back there.
Here's from the back. Here's from the back, right? Here's from the front. Front, 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 back, back. Play.
Nice,
They're all
yeah.
good. They're all good. Yes, Sharon.
I'm curious about where the actual ball and socket joint of the hip fits in with that, because that's like, it's easy for me to think of that, the ball and socket joint moving, rotating towards the front or the back, or even up and down and all that. But then the one joint in front and the two in the back, that's like not an experience that I've had really consciously, but I'm sure it is part of that. Anytime you would turn, like have your foot planted and rotate to change, but is there like sort of a tiny percent, is it, or I don't know.
You know, a lot of this, there's a small movement there, but it's also how powerful imagery is. So the image creates the movement. So if I move from the front and then my leg rotates, it's different than if I rotate my leg, right? Because you probably didn't see that. It's like, well, the front's opening, then there's the leg, rather than I move the leg in the socket.
Right, yeah, it's just a different way of thinking about it that I haven't.
Yeah, and again, we're looking for support. We're looking for kind of the origins of this, getting as much support as possible, and also not overdoing all this stuff, and also getting in the lower back. So many people are having issues through there as well, activating the front. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts before we take a little break? Or something you want to mention or ask about?
Yeah, I noticed in working with the pubic symphysis as initiator, sort of a character emerging in the way that I move when I'm upright. Like that it makes me want to like really curve my steps across, like not forward but across, and even the foot gets this like bevel, the opposite of what you'd want in like a ballet foot, and it's like this interesting sort of crossing step
Looks
character.
cool. Yeah.
Just playing with that and noticing
Sure. Yeah.
what it does.
Neil, did you have a question?
Yeah, I also noticed on the opposite end, playing with the rotation, the two parts of the pelvis, and then on the opposite end of the spine, I was finding that mirrored in my scapula.
Scapula. Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you, of course. And that's, again, that's part of the appendicular skeleton. So yeah, completely do that. Thank you. I kind of forgot to add that in there. Yeah, any of these folding things, there's one half of the scapula sliding, coming back for sure. Yeah.
Erika,
Yeah.
I'm wondering too if, because in my work, one of the big exercises that we do is dropping down the spine and rolling back up. And so I just wonder if some point today we could play with that with different, maybe the belly of this, I don't know.
Yeah.
But just
Yeah,
articulating
I know
that.
what you mean. Yeah. And I think, yeah, we're going to look at that in terms of this distal initiation and support. And so remember we were doing this thing, right?
Yeah.
Distal initiation, and we're going to
Right.
look at it through levering. We're going to look at it through levering from the ground, levering up and through.
Okay, yeah. Oh, and then just a question about that. So the axis is like the condyle.
There's two. Wendell, come over here for a second. So I'm the sockets. This is the atlas, and he's the condyle. So he's rotating.
Okay, and he is the occiput. He's the occiput.
No, I'm the occiput, and
Oh.
he's the skull. I mean, sorry, you're right. Yeah, you're right. That's right. Yeah, I had reversed my brain. Yes, that's right.
So it goes this way.
So he's the occiput, skull, the bottom, and you're the atlas.
That's right.
Great. Now, the axis just below you would go like that. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, well, let's
One quick question about
Yes.
the beginning. Hey, how are you doing?
Hi.
You were in the very beginning with the bone exercise to let go of the muscles and go into the bones. You gave some specific prompts that I was trying to write down. I heard you say prop, push, release, stack. I mean, I'm just kind of trying to find some sort of organization of like the pattern of that exercise, just so that I can have something to launch off with to play with later.
Yeah, it wasn't any particular order. So that's, I was just kind of throwing them out as possible experiences. But yeah, so flinging, it's like flinging, that's one thing, flinging.
And these are all related to somehow expanding the sensory awareness of the quality of the bones.
Right.
So flinging is one, right, quality.
It's one quality.
Yeah,
I can
well,
release
the
them.
bones.
I can fling them. I can prop on them. I can prop. And we haven't done yet, but we're going to do kind of levering. I can lever from my hand to my lower arm, to my upper arm, through my rib cage, right? So there's a whole levering that can happen. We haven't done that in detail yet, but we were playing with that levering. Stacking, it's kind of like, one bone on top of the other bone, on top of the other bone, and then stack them.
We're going to break those out more. We're going to break them out a little bit. Yeah.
What else did we do? We did releasing the bones, right, into gravity, into weight, feeling the weightedness of the bones. We did putting kind of finding the surface of the bones, right? Like we have that image of paint, you know, covering the body. You want to put the paint on the floor. So you're rolling and getting the paint off of the floor. That's the surface of the bones. We got Carol?
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah, let me finish with that and then you jump in there. We did sounding, try to bring up. We did.
What was that? Sounding, the vibration, you called it sounding?
Vibration. Vibration, bring up sensory awareness, the bones, right?
Tracing.
We did tracing. A lot of times we talk about tracing the bones, tracing them, finding the, you know, that's not muscle, there's muscle around, that's the meat. You have to separate the meat from the bone, separate the meat from the bone. We did tracing the bones. Right. There's a lot of things. I'm sure you'll come up with a lot of ones. It really is the, you know, you can keep going with all kinds of images and things you could do with. We did relationships, right? What is a relationship between, you know, these little bones in the feet and how they connect into the knee, they connect into the pelvis, they connect into the rib cage, they connect into the skull. It's just relationships. Where do you want to initiate? Where do you want to start? I'm going to start with this little finger. I'm going to go into this bone. I'm going to go into here. I'm going to go then into a rib. Then I'm going to go into my pelvis. Relationships, sequencing. Is that helping, Constance?
It's great. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure.
And the extra. That.
And Carol and Reese had.
No, that was Reese. Carol.
Oh.
Carol. So it felt like I discovered a new mechanic or relationship. Is there some kind of parallel movement between the occipital bones sliding on the condyles and the femur bones, the neck of the femur bones sliding in the hip socket of the pelvis?
Sounds good to me.
Way that actually just kind of freed up my movement when I was getting stuck in like muscular or something, just kind of thinking they're both kind of going in the same pattern within the socket. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, it's, you know,
there's a slight over curve even in the pelvis.
Like the sockets are going over the balls. Right?
Yeah.
The balls,
Yeah.
under the balls. Beautiful. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, let's take 10 minutes. So let's say at at 17 after, everyone's different, after the hour, wherever you are, 17 after the hour, okay? Hello, coming on back. So it feels like now we really need to go back to the distal. What we were doing here was a lot of proximal, right? Kind of closer in, the pelvis, even though it's part of the appendicular skeleton, it's closer to our proximal body. Like we said, movement develops from the end points, whether it's the mouth, the hands, the feet, or the tail. So I know some of you did my reflex workshop, and many of you didn't. So I feel compelled to just reignite the reflexes of these ends, because that's a great way to kind of, connect up into feeling the distal ends. It's like the key in. And so I know that Wendell many times in working with the development movement is saying, find it from the distal, let it come into the proximal, find it from the distal. And again, we're so used to coming from the core, from here. So let's touch back a little bit to some of these reflexes and kind of wake them up a little bit. And it doesn't matter about the names, but hands, right? So when you stroke, right? When you stroke on the, it's called the ulnar side. This is the ulnar bone. So there's two bones in there are two bones in the lower arm, right? And so the one that is, trace it from your pinky, that's called the ulnar side. We're going to use this later in a few minutes, so this is good. We trace from our pinky, that's the ulnar bone. If you trace from your thumb, that's the radial bone. And one bone goes over the other. So here I'm going to hold my ulnar, I'm going to rotate my radius over my ulnar. So we can articulate those bones. I'm actually holding the ulnar and rotating. Otherwise, I might do this. That's different, right? That's not articulating. These two bones are staying together. They're not separating. Here, I'm separating them. You can feel them, they're moving. One's moving in there, right? So if I stroke the inside of this is for baby, right? For us, it's less apparent, but the baby's gonna grasp it. It's called palmar grasp, right? It's like on the palm, on the outer edge, they're gonna grasp it. Grasp, grasp. If I do the other side, the radial side, they're gonna grasp their thumb or a toy, right? Grasp something, grasp. So we have these, we can come from the radial side, we can come from the other side. Just play with that a little bit and feel it's a grasp. It's a grasp. And of course, little tiny babies, you tickle them there and they do this and they go like that, right? So we're waking up those sensory. So all this is happening here, not here, right? It's really down at these end points. I'm gonna try the other side. So it's like stroke from the radial side, it's like you want to grasp, you can even, pick up something, right? Or the other side, palmar grasp, palmar, yeah. 1, 2, 2, 2. So waking us up, lots of reflexes. There's pulling reflexes, all kinds of things that are activated from these nerves, right? We're trying to find these reflexes that then of course go through our musculature, right? Play a little bit, do a little reflex dance. It's all happening here. Right? Activating those little nerves. Same thing with the footsies, okay? So your foot, and again, like I said, a lot of us are, kind of dead, probably not you guys, because you're working a lot, bare feet and all that, but so if we brush on this side of the big toe side, the foot's gonna go towards it. It's gonna grasp, and if we were in trees, right? This would be where we would grasp a branch, right? We did at one point evolutionary, we grasped a branch there, right? To hold on to, right? So it's this grasp. And then if we brush the top side of the foot, and the other, it flares out. It flares out. That's called the Babinski for some reason. Dr. Babinski must have discovered it. So you brush here and the foot flares out. Foot flares out. If you're around little babies, test it out. Pretty reliable. One way, the other way. And again, just play a little bit with those kinds of responses in the feet. Coming in, grasping the tree branch, right? Releasing a tree branch, releasing it. With the other foot too, so we wake them up. Grasp, 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 release, release. This is the top side, the top side. A lot of nerves, right? Mouth. You take your finger. So this is called rooting. When I'm just stimulating a little bit of my mouth, I just go, turns my head. Up, down, flexion, extension, all comes from the mouth. Diagonal, diagonal, diagonal down, right down. So we're not moving our head from our neck, we're moving it from our mouth, meaning that's the initiation. That's the initiation. This is way more primitive, right? When we're born, right? This is our initial movement of the head. Distal to the core. All planes, up, flexion down, side, side, diagonal. It's really worthwhile to play with, seeing if you can initiate, because this is, you know, our heritage from the mouth, rather than, this comes way later that we can move this way, initiate from there. So I'm trying to wake up, use my tongue, try to play a little bit, little tongue dance. So when we're doing that over curve, right? It's the rooting, could go up, down, and over. Or up. See if you can feel it go through your spine, right? So I'm sitting now, I'm gonna free up my spine a little bit. And like, oh, I'm gonna go side. There it goes, 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 there it goes. Other way. There you go. I find the other end. Right? Or I could go on a diagonal. And I could go like up, like taking me back. Now I'm going to go down with my tongue on the lower part of my mouth. Up and over. And it can come in. So just initiating your spinal movement from your mouth. Okay, take a moment. Spinal movement means head to tail, from your mouth, from rooting, from this basic desire, right? Need and desire. Of course, all the patterns have psychophysical aspects to them. I need and I want, and I'm gonna get it. I maybe latch on, right? So you could reach, and you could take hold, and you could bring it in, right? Still from the mouth. Right, when you latch on to the imaginary breast there, right? You latch on, you go bring it back in. Then you're satisfied. Back and in. Of course, as we get into the organs and all that, so, right? But finding that initiation from the front here. And let it go through the spine. So we're letting it go through the spine. Right? Through the spine. Powerful, powerful reflex of survival. And interestingly, it's again in the front, just like we're in the front of the pelvis. Yeah, it can take your whole spine. into any plane. Yes, yeah. I'm saying yes because I'm seeing some of it. It's happening.
Well, I had found that. So that might be why she found it.
Somebody's like, this sucks.
What about the other end? So we grasp, we take in, and then we release out the other end, right? Anal rooting. So this is skeletally, this is the tail, right? We have the head, mouth as a reflex. So the reflex is anal rooting. That means that the pelvic floor is opening and condensing, and opening and condensing. And the very, very tip of your tail is the initiator, right? So see if you can let that go from the other end. Go from tail, anal rooting, up through the mouth, mouth, up and over, down and through the tail. Where does my tail, just like my mouth, want to go? Through that primitive reflex, right? If you change a baby's diapers or whatever, that area is very active. It's alive, it reaches, it condenses, it comes in. It's the basis of the pelvic floor support and initiation. So connect the two up, right? You've got mouth taking the spine, you've got tail taking the spine, mouth taking the spine, tail taking the spine, whatever you like. Two ends. Yeah. And of course, this would relate to organs, right? Going through the whole digestive. This is rooting is to get food. So right away, we're in the digestive system, even though we're talking skeletally, right? There's the whole connection through the mouth, the esophagus, and down through the middle organs, digestive system, now the other end. So that, of course, would lend a lot of softness to your movement, right? A lot of flexibility and softness. Those tubes are soft. So we're touching on the organ system. Yeah. Playing with that. Yeah. And how the power of those reflexes can bring you into all these different planes. All these different, so the spine can move sagittally, laterally, spirilically. So if you're exploring, you're going to go through all those planes. So the support of the patterns really does need these basic kind of underlying reflexes support system to find the distal, right? To go into the deeper development, an earlier development, before we had our strength in our proximal body. Yeah, and the continuity of moving down, that's where, of course, the digestive system helps a lot, right? The continuity and the softness going through those tissues. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So bringing that into this early pattern of naval radiation, let's see if the naval radiation, for those who are not familiar with it, is an early pattern in utero connected to the umbilical cord, right? And we've got the sense of our umbilical cord, but we're gonna really connect to the distal. We're gonna connect to the distal ends of the limbs, all right? We're gonna have all 6 going at once, right? So we've got hands and feet, head and tail, hands and feet, head and tail, like a big octopus, right? Hands and feet, head and tail. We're just checking ourselves that we're initiating really from those. You can even, you know, rub your hands or find those reflexes again. And we're not coming from our elbows or our shoulders or somewhere else. We're initiating at the very end point. We're not initiating from the knees. We're going down to those reflexes. So playing your octopus, navel radiation, starfish, right? So you're going out and coming back in. So that center of that is the navel, but we're initiating, we're just staying with distal for a while, because it's less familiar to us. So even when we come in to the navel, we can go out distally into the distal ends, back to the distal ends. Yep, in all planes, mouth is alive, it's alive as the tail. Tail is a limb, supporting on the other end. Right, good. All 6 endpoints engage. Yeah, and the grasps, right? If you get lost, like where am I? Find your primitive grasp. Hands, like grasping, pulling, right? Those reflexes. Same with the feet. Find those reflexes coming in, going out, fanning the toes, coming back. My mouth, tail, anal rooting. All 6 are active. Good. And then, you know, you can play. It's like, whoa, my hand just went out, right? The others followed. Or my foot just did it. My other endpoints followed, right? So you can go from equality to giving preference, right? So maybe one limb reaches into space and grasps space and pulls it in. Right? Then the foot reaches out and pulls the rest of the body in. So you have a lot of choices of which endpoint you give the initiation to. The others follow in. We're still in the distal mind though. Distal mind. Right, but one can take over and another one takes over. Yeah. You can change levels, you can go down, you can come mid-level, you can come up, standing level. So the distal ends will give you support for your core. It's not all about building up the core, it's activating these ends. Give the core a rest. Supporting from the end points, that's our heritage, developmental heritage. Okay, let's bring all our endpoints back to the center here for a moment. Okie dokes. So technically, speaking technically, the more action and ability to find those endpoints, the more we can release our central axis. Right? That can be one of the results, is that we're not holding so hard to be upright or we've got help. We've got help, especially pelvic floor, tail, all of that. So that's like a technical piece there. So let's take one pattern which will show us kind of in a little bit more detail this connection from the distal to the proximal. Some of you know these, they're called they're PNF patterns, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. Doesn't matter the name, but they're patterns that are used a lot in physical therapy for healing when there's a problem. Basically, it's trying to make a sequence, right? The body works in spirals and sequences. So they're patterns that are, again, developmental. You know, we can see these in all the developmental patterns. But we're just going to do one or two so you can get the kind of feel of how we're sequencing through the bones. Because that's our next little topic is here. Well, how do we sequence through the bones? How do we make this sequencing happen? So let's just take, we have enough the skeleton. Right, so we have the thumb side here. Thumb side. So the thumb side goes into the radius. So, Wendell, could you hold the skeleton? So the thumb side goes into the radius, right? Into the radius. That sequences, this is just for kind of, I guess you would say, articulation. And in terms of muscles work in chains. So we're setting up a chain, right? It's used in physical therapy for strengthening and sequencing through muscles. So we have from the radius coming up into the humerus bone. This is big bone here, the humerus bone, right? The radius to the humerus. And then if you can see, this is what I want you to see on here. Part of the scapula comes into the front of the body. So here's the scapula, right? But if you look at it, it's also in the front. It's got a little knob here called the coracoid process. It's a little knob. So the scapula, we think it's in the back, but it comes into the front of the body. It's under the clavicle. The pectoral muscles attached there. It's it's part of the scapula in the front. So that's one line of connection that we're going to feel. The other is the pinky side. The pinky side, that goes into the ulnar bone. Remember we said there's two bones here. That goes into the ulnar bone, right? That goes up the humerus bone, and then it goes down along the outside of the scapula to the tip of the scapula. When I say it goes, it just means it's a sequence of muscles activating, right? That there's a chain there of connection from the pinky all the way up into the tip of the scapula. So you have a situation where the front and the back are connected, okay? So probably some of you have heard me say this, but this ulnar side, let's trace it. Pinky, there's a little knob here, ulnar bone, humerus bone, down this back of the scapula to the tip of this, that's your wing. That's your primitive wing, your pterodactyl wing. It's connected from here to here. It's support. So just do that, like a little string. Pinky takes the scapula, scapula takes the pinky. Pinky takes the scapula, right? Pinky takes the scapula down, up and down. Yeah. Then take your radius, your thumb side, and trace this bone, which is the radius bone. The radius coming up to the humerus bone, And it's gonna land, if you can find the little knob of the front of your scapula. The way I do it, if you do like make a muscle or like stick your pecs out, you'll feel something, little bump pop out there. Little bump, it's in the front, little bump. Right, so that's this part. So reach with your thumb and let it pull your little bump, so it's as if your scapula is going through your body, through your body, through your body. So and it's not the shoulders here, right? It's the scapula. It's not lifting like this. It's the front, right? Reach and let it pull it like you have a string on your thumb, and it's pulling this little part of your scapula forward. Right? So you have these two aspects. And it's interesting because developmentally, right, we actually work when the baby's coming up and using its hands, it's working all those connections, right? And what you don't see with a lot of babies is this, right? Or somehow we get somewhere else, right? It's really connected into this whole structure here. So we'll do a few things. I'm going to stand up. Whoops. So I'm going to take my radial side and this is like putting your sword in your scabbard here. Just do that. Put your sword in your scabbard. Then I'm going to take my sword out. So I'm going to go thumb, radius, humerus, tip of the scapula, tip of this to my wing. I got my wing. Now I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go radius, thumb, radius, humerus. I'm going to feel this connection, right? From the front of my scapula to here. I'm going to take it out. Radius, going out. Thumb, radius, going in. So I'm keeping this connection. Let's try the other side. Check it out. And I think I said one thing that was opposite. So a little dyslexia, so I mixed one little thing up. Put your sword in your scabbard, right? This is the radial side. We're staying with the radial side. That's why I didn't make clear, right? So thumb, radius, all the way through. So here, when I reach with my thumb, I'm feeling a string attached to the front of my scapula. Can you open it? Can you open it? So we're still with the radial side. Radius, thumb, radius, humerus, put it back. We're looking for distal initiation, not from the shoulder, not from the elbow. Thumb, radius, humerus, front. So I can really open that up. You really stretch, open it, not disconnect, keep it connected, connected, connected. Now I'm going to come back from the end point, thumb, radius. Check it out. Let's do the other side, the pinky side. I'm going to go pinky, ulnar, humerus, tip of the scapula, tip of the scapula. Just feel that connection. You reach with the tip of the scapula, with the pinky, it takes the tip of the scapula. And then I'm just going to come back, pinky, and back, the other side. Pinky, ulnar, humerus, tip of the scapula, reach, but connect. Reach for connect. Reach for connect. Pinky. Ulnar. Check it out. So we're linking up muscle chains, but really we're doing this because we want to sequence through the bones, right? And one of the things that happens is that the mid bones become the initiators, the knees and the elbows. I mean, as habits, right? Knees and elbows start initiating. We lose the support from the end to the core, to back, right? We break it up with this. I'm not saying never do that. I'm just saying that technically we can have issues there where everything's initiated through there. So we're trying to link up because developmentally, that's how it worked too. Really came from the end points into the core. And that's how we move. That's how we pull. That's how we push. That's how we reach, right? It's connected. And that's how we locomote in terms of our early development. So take a moment here. If you want to play, you want to do both. You do both. Thumb through. Thumb radiating out. Thumbs radiating. Thumbs radiating out. Pinky. This is the pinky side, to the tip of the scapula. Tip of the scapula. Scapula brings the hand in. So whatever combinations, there's no special way, but checking yourself if you're initiating with the elbows, are you really finding this connection going all the way through? Because that's a key to the developmental movement, is the connection all the way through, from the end points to the closer to the core. Based on initial reflexes too. If you gain, you can do one for the lower body here, right? So then we have this reflex where the toes come under. We have that little reflex here. So we can brush the floor. We can brush the floor. That can come into the femur bone, all the way up into the hip socket. And we can go the other way with the foot, and it can take us through. So we're brushing. This is a reflex underneath, bringing it in, and then we're changing it. So the leg is coming eventually turn down, but it's starting from these lower bones, right? It's starting from the foot, two little bones in the lower leg, into the femur bone, into the pelvis, and then from the foot into the femur bone, into the lower leg, right? So we're just doing the same thing. We're doing the same thing. And that last one I did, I could tell I did it with my elbow. I said, lay into the elbow. So we're testing that's coming from the distal ends. From the distal ends. From the distal ends. Whatever we like. Distal is the key. Right? I'm just playing with it. you know, trying to relieve some of these big guys, big muscles, having to do it all, right? You're getting all the support from the ends. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and you know, as you're playing and doing it, you're kind of self-analyzing. It's like, oh yeah, I found the distal. Oh, I went to the elbows. Ooh, you're just checking yourself out to feel that change of pattern, perhaps, rather than from the leg, from the big guns, we say. So it's when Wendell in class is saying, find the small muscles of your hands and your feet. That's what he's talking about. Find the small muscles of your hands and your feet to initiate and to support. And of course, that includes the mouth, tail. Yeah, I'm watching. So, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, I can really tell when it's like the knee is lifting, right? Or the foot is doing it. Right? It's very interesting. You really see it. Let's do one very kind of common pattern. It's also a lot in yoga, so it might be good to do it, where we can work with both of these things we just did. So I'm going to show you, and you can follow suit. I'm going to be on my belly. I'm going to be there. So this is the, you know, when the baby first comes up to look around, right? It's lying prone. But we're going to exaggerate it. We're going to go on our ulnar sides. That means I put my hands up so that I'm just going to rub my ulnar, pinky to ulnar. And in my mind, I'm going to establish the connection between my pinky and the tip of my scapula. This pattern also has a relationship to the ribs. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my head center, and then I'm going to begin to press down through my pinky, and then I'm going to let that go through my ulnar. I'm going to let that go through my radius, through my humerus. I'm going to go to the tip of my scapula, right? And then as I go through the middle, I'm going to go into my thumb side, and I'm going to go into my coracoid process. We'll go into my front side. And then I'm going to reverse it. I'm going to come back through to the middle and back to pinky side. This is just exactly what you'll see with the baby. Right? We're doing it very technically, but this is what you'll see. They're going to go, this is supporting. This pattern first is the supporter. I'm supporting through the pinky ulnar side into the tip of the scapula. And as I come through, I'm ready to do something. I'm ready to reach. Maybe it reaches for the toy, right? Or it starts to go forward. And that's going to pull from my hand, my thumb, up through here to the front of my body, right? So that's this reaching out. We'll do that again. Do it a little angle here. I'm rubbing to feel my ulnar side. I'm already connecting pinky, ulnar, humerus, tip of the scapula. I'm beginning to put pressure through that push. First I yield, then I push. And push, I start to come through. I'm connecting to the tip of my scapula. I come through more, I start to go into the middle. It's kind of the middle of my ribs. And then I start to come into the front body. Front body. What's up here? What's going on? I'm going to push back. I got power there. I got power. And I'm going to come back. One more time. Rubbing. So when I say it's connection to the ribs, I'm kind of going through upper ribs, middle ribs, lower ribs. Pinky side, ulnar side, humerus into the tip of the scapula, and I start bringing my weight towards the middle finger, and into the front, where I have agency. Now I have agency, right, through this front part. Not only that, rather than here, it's going to bring me into the ability to move my body forward, right, or to reach. Yeah, when you want to say something?
Well, I just want to make sure, I want to make sure that you're getting that thing, because the developmental stuff is with so many things that I'm saying, and I see you doing it, and I feel like people are getting it. But when my language I'm using is I'm saying when we come up, I'm saying it much more generally, but this is how to do it. When you come through and you really articulate the ulnar into the, whatever that other one is, it goes into the front. And I keep saying, that's the biggest key, and Erika just demonstrated well, really well. It's like, it's the front surface. I'm saying keep transferring through the underlying surface.
And that's because technically the thumb is going to the to right here, the front of the scapula.
So if you can articulate and really feel, really use your hand, and that articulate your hand there, it will keep you, and then when Erika said that word agency, it gives you a huge amount of agency, right? Because we've been doing the homologous, when we come up, then I actually have a way to release down that whole thing. But then when Erika was reaching, it keeps you in the front rather than going over. And that's going to link right up through your organs and be able to connect into your leg. So that's how you make those connections. So it's just great to see.
It's just one of those keys there, because what we tend to do is push up and we go into our back space. So we're trying to link it up. And in terms of evolution, I would say these are our wings, right? Our pterodactyl wings. But then we grasp our prey, pull it in. We pull it into us. So we have wings, maybe do that like wings, grasping. This is fine motor movement. This, and this is like, I'm supported. I've got my wings. My wings are supporting me. And then
I don't know if you notice, when you really grasp, there's a reflexive kind of electrical response. It's like you could never do it just by working muscularly, articulately, but if you actually grasp up there and start and you pull from there, from the distance, everything articulates.
here's another way. I'm gonna lie down, you stand up. Right, so I'm gonna, you're not listening to me here. I'm going to grasp. I'm going to grasp.
It's
traction reflex, but it brings me into the front. Right?
Yeah, but I kept going away from her, so she really had to articulate. Yeah.
I'm gonna do once more because I want to feel I got my support here. Here's my ulnar, and then I'm gonna. That making sense?
It has to do a lot with this, all this other, these things that we've been working about softening the front. So if you really, this has everything to do with this sternum releasing and this folding through the middle and all of that in order to release the front so that change can happen, so that you can actually link up.
So anyway, that's a very clearly, you see that with babies, it's just so beautiful when they support themselves and have this very nice alignment of front and back.
Just let me point this, just because we did it in class, I'm sorry people weren't in class, I think it's really helpful anyway. So we've been dragging our hands, I sort of was asking you to drag your hands, so when we're reaching, it really stimulates that's what we were doing, I was doing the ulnar side. And it's the reflex there's this grasp and reach forward, and it takes you right into the front, into the heart.
Into the front, rather than to the back. Yeah, that's a great exercise for to brush and then you crawl. I don't want to do this.
Yeah, you don't even have to do it on the floor if you actually do the articulation of the underside to the top side.
It'll pull you.
It'll pull you through. We've called it gathering a little bit in class. I'm gathering in, and that's because I'm making this connection. And when I reach, then I connect all the way into my feet and my tail. Everything just falls into place.
So our last little mini topic here, which we're covering a lot of ground here, literally, but it's really just the word levering. And it's like we're doing this without gravity here. But levering is how, one set of bones levers you into another set of bones, levers you into another set of bones. It's how you make sequencing, right? And it has a lot to do with the actions of yielding, pushing, reaching, and maybe grasping and pulling it or not, right? So it's this sequencing through the joints. And that's why it's so helpful to even look at the skeleton and then impose the skeleton on your own body and really find all of these many, many joints. To experience them. It doesn't mean to know the names or whatever. To experience the capacity for all these spaces to interact and move. And then you can lever, and when you can lever, you can have a lot of support, right? Because you're following the chain through. You're levering through. So it's a simple concept in a way, but it has a lot of ramifications. That if I lever, so I yield to my foot, that's going to sequence. That's going to sequence into these bones. That's going to sequence into this bone. That's going to sequence into this bone, into my spine, into my head, whatever I want to do. That's simply what levering is, right? That I'm finding the ground, I'm yielding. So these are our developmental actions. Yield, find earth, and to earth, yield. But I'm aware of these connections. So I have little bones in the hands, right? The little bones in this hand. It's going to sequence into these bones, and maybe it's going to sequence to these ribs, and it's going to sequence to this arm, to that hand, and then I'm ready to yield and lever again. Any way I want. Yeah? To follow the train, right? So try it a little bit and then we can talk, but follow the train of how you can lever from where, you could be on your side, right? You can have your hand, you could press, push. This is when Wendell's always talking about find the undersurface, find where you touch earth, lever from there, and let it go through. Don't lift. So if you lever, you don't lift. That's a big little banner. If you lever, you don't have to lift. So maybe play with that a little bit. What's the difference between lifting and levering through the joints? Big difference, contrast. You can do some lifting, heavy lifting, and then levering to get you where you want to go. Standing, sitting.
So that alleviates muscles.
Oh yeah. Oh
That's
yeah.
great.
Oh yeah. That's right. Yeah. So levering. you can just think bones. You know, one bone goes to another bone, goes into another bone, another bone. And then you balance the muscle action. So just playing with that. And you can check yourself, did I lift to get there? Or did I lever through my skeleton to get there? A really big difference. We all know, you know, to the other side, we just lift up. But here we're going to lever through the bones, Forget the muscles for a while. Yeah. Levering, and you can kind of follow the train, right? Even if you don't know the names, anything, you can follow it proprioceptively. You can feel like, oh, I went from my hand into my wrist bones, and that connected up through there. That went into wherever you want to go, but you're going to connect them up and through. Oh, that went into my head. Whatever. So you could kind of visually see the chain. Right? It's kind of, you can help by see the chain of events unfolding from one bone to another, to another, to another.
Would you say taking weight through the bones?
Yeah, taking weight.
So
That's
maybe that's
yielding.
another way to think, take weight through the bones.
Take weight through the bones, but then transfer the
Yeah,
weight. Transfer the weight. Transfer the
through
weight.
transfers through the
Through
joints.
the joints, through all those spaces. Transfer the weight through the spaces. It's, you know, that old song, the hip bone connected to the thigh bone connected. That's what you're doing. You're connecting them up, and you can connect them to the whole body. That's up to you, you know.
So you should be able to, you know, you can experiment with levering from any surface.
Levering.
So it doesn't have to
Thank you.
necessarily be hands or feet. It
Absolutely.
can be your forearm to your, you know, we've
That's
done
right.
a lot of this in class. Using whole surfaces of the body,
Lever
to
from whatever surface, whatever undersurface.
Yeah.
And in this world, any surface can be a pusher. Any surface you can yield and push from. Any surface you can yield and push from. Any surface can be a pusher. And that means if any surface can be a pusher, then we can find where is the reach or the lightness. So here are qualities, right? We have yield, push, lightness comes out of that. Right? Downward moving energy, upward moving energy, because I found the connection through. I found the connection. It's not separate. So there we find compression and suspension. Very important in developmental work. Compression means good yielding and push, finding earth, finding support, and then we find the ease of suspension because we've got the levering. Yeah, and this is, you know, we could say if muscles are involved, you're going to come in. I mean, not as our focus, but it's power and strength. Which levering is a little different than flopping or releasing the bone. It's a different way of using it. It's setting up a chain. Right? Setting up a chain that moves through. One bone to the next bone to the next bone. So there's power there, I guess is what I want to say. Because it's connected. Connecting to the whole, it's always whole body. There's nothing that's not whole body. Right, because it doesn't matter what you're doing, there's always a supporting surface. So there's always whole body. Yeah, and it's great, you know, so something you're doing, you know, is to really lever yourself up, you know, through your feet, through the bones of your lower leg. So this is like what Kimberly was saying, like we go over, and then we like push from the feet into these bones of the knees to the thighs, into the pelvis. And we can lever through its sequence up through the skull. And then we've got the compressive element through the feet, and we've got the suspension through the skull. Right? If we want to go down, we can go down a lot of different ways. We could be articulate, we could release, that would be one thing, we let your bones go. We could articulate, right? Up and over with the skull, through these bones, through the spine, right? So this would be different. That would be a different way of using the bones, releasing. Lots of qualities, bones have lots of qualities. Oh, another minute or two, yeah. Keeping on playing with that. Yeah. And in your experimentation, if you can slowly make your way, if you could lever your way up to standing, don't just lift, lever your way up to standing. Through each connection, you get up there. Right. And, you know, we could say walking is levering. One way to look at it, right? So if I'm, you know, going to, you know, put my weight into one leg, really feel my feet, the little bones in my feet, right? And then I'm going to feel from the ground, I'm going to feel that push up from the earth, right? So I can lever little bones of my feet into the lower bones of the leg, into the thigh bone, into the pelvis, and all the way up and out the top of the head. Ah, yield, yield, yield. Push from the foot, lever through those bones, through those bones, through those bones, out the top of the head. Ah. Right, so walking as levering, which is just going to really keep our connection to earth. Right? Compression and suspension. We'll feel, right, as we start to go from the ground, we go through, how we yield again. Just simple walking. So we don't have to lift up. We can just lever or push. Another word, of course, we always use is push. Yield and push. Yield and push to reach. So I can use that language. I can go yield through the foot, push through the undersurface of the foot. Let that go into the lightness of the reach at the top of the head. Then I'm ready to go to the other side. Yield, push, travels at the top of the head, reach. Just another language related to the actions of the patterns. Developmentally. And we're kind of taking a mental journey through all the bones, right? Mental and physical journey, like feeling their connections. Sure, I could go from feet, we go through, I could keep levering, keep going down. Then I'm transferring to the balls of my feet. I'm going to go into releve right at the top of the head. All ready to yield again. Feet, levering through, levering through, levering through, reaching. Yield again. Because when we're standing, we just have our little feet as the undersurface, right? So we have to really make sure we're using good use of that levering, or else we're going to have a lot of tension, a lot of holding, right? So baby practices with all surfaces, all surfaces. And then unfortunately, when we become adults, we realize, I think we don't have any support anymore. So we got to go back down there to really feel that from the ground. We can tell where we lock, right? Some of us, lock our knees, and we drop the knees back. Then this becomes a stick. It becomes a prop. I can't leave her once I've made that prop. You can try that. We call it the propping reflex. Prop. Then I made my leg into a thing, and I can't get support. Just block it. Lost it there. The connectivity. Right, so free form levering from foot through the body, reaching, right? Push, yield, push, reach, maybe grasp, pull, whatever you like. Just free play of feeling those connections go through. Yeah. Round up, or if you go over from the hands, right from the hands to the legs, right, heel to the hands, whatever. Same with the hands, arms. You have a wall, it's great. You can release your bones of your hand, you can push through, connect it. Do it with your head, push your head into the wall, connect your tail, head to tail. Yeah, so maybe we'll leave a little time here. We've got a few minutes for questions or thoughts or comments. I don't know, do you want to join in? Maybe you want to say something? Or...
I will.
So, yeah, if there's any.
Could you trace one more time when you were lying on your belly and there was when you were thinking about coming up here?
Yeah, put your hands on this, on just the sides of your, yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, so that way you can really feel that ulnar side and then go and then transfer it to the radial as you go through.
And so by the time you're up,
You're kind of mid, you're kind of coming up, you're slowly transferring kind of in the middle. When you're all the way up, you're really in the front. Yeah, really in the front, push through. Yeah, and don't hurt back or anything, but really find the agency of your thumb to the front, the coracoid here, to open up the front. Yeah. Yeah, it's coming, yeah.
My bones feel very like alive, and I'm just struck by the point about our bones love gravity. And I don't know, for some reason, when we're starting to put weight on our upper bodies, on our forearms, I was holding back a little bit because I thought, oh, I'm gonna break myself or break something, but actually there's so much resilience and strength in the bones, and I feel enlivened.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Roger. I feel that way too. I feel like everything's kind of like, whoa, but it's a different feeling than if I went to the gym, which I love to do. You know, it's just a different feeling. Yeah.
I think this thing of identifying all these ways Erika gave us of identifying many different ways of identifying with the bones, or being able to experience what is the bones function in this movement, I agree with you that I always feel incredibly vulnerable when I go, okay, I'm going to leave her. I'm not just going to like haul myself, I'm going to leave her. And it feels
Scary.
fabulous, and also takes more time. I feel like I'm cutting corners by muscling and all of that. And so I think that's all an illusion, but that's happening. So I think giving it its due in terms of like vulnerability and what is it really like to let the weight pass through the bones? It is anyway, but our mind often doesn't allow ourselves to experience that. So if you experience it, that's one of the body mind sensory things. If you can let it into your awareness, then actually repatterning will occur and change will occur, even on a tissue level. That's at least what's asserted. So it's very cool, actually. Yeah.
I'm so glad you and Roger shared that. I was like, what? I feel like I'm not quite even getting to levering, and that's what it's fear. It's this fear of moving through every part, of like taking ownership of every part, or maybe not ownership, but connecting to all of the all of the bones, all of the connections.
Yeah, no, I think there's a whole psychophysical aspect that one can explore individually with students or whatever around what is that vulnerability, and what is that, and what are our muscles doing to hold ourselves together, and what are the muscles for, and are they for movement, and which they're for movement, expressivity, and that kind of power. But underneath the architecture is, like a building. That's what's going to hold us up.
Even in mainstream medicine, they'll always talk about if for older people, if they really want older people and everybody to do weight bearing exercise, because it strengthens the bones. So swimming and bicycling and so on is always said to not really strengthen the bones in the same way as walking even, or running. And that's all about this kind of change of tissue. Tissue really changes by its usage, or by our awareness. So
there were a couple of things in the chat. Leslie, did you get those?
Yep. I found a website here that you can visit to see a picture of a lever.
Oh, a lever.
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Cool.
It is exactly that kind of lever we're talking
Lever,
about.
yeah, lever. Right.
Lever.
Lever.
Can I just say something about that whole leverage moving from the bones and stuff? As an older person, and who has friends who are older and more compromised in their overall strength and so on, the leverage can be used, the bone leverage can be used, and it is used like even unconsciously, like to get out of a chair. An old person will go like this and push with the arms as well as the legs to get that, because the bones are still stronger than the muscles. But that's also why it's dangerous for to lose the strength in the bones, because you put more use into them just sort of automatically. So yeah, weight bearing exercise and all of that, really good. But it's lovely because you can, not be so strong and still get out of your chair, or, get up off the floor, or stand up from the garden using that leverage. So.
And it also leads you into placement.
Yes.
If you're really tracking leverage, things you have to pull yourself into a certain kind of alignment in order to sequence through. And even the intention and willingness to track it starts to make one more efficient and more range, really. It's great that way.
Yeah.
I want to share a little quick story that I have recently had surgery on my feet, and I've had a lot of surgery on my feet. And I've been working with Erika and Wendell for 7 years now, and the bones were, when I found the bones early on, I work with the bones every day. So my doctor went in, she was expecting my feet to be very brittle because they've had so much work done on them. And after the surgery, she said, your bones and your feet are so strong. She was shocked. And I'm like, because like Wendell was saying, we can literally change the tissue every day. I look at the bones in my feet, I know that's why.
Yeah. Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I wanted to say too that it allows access. Like for the work that I'm doing, I don't have this workshop's been able to. It's almost like I do physical theater, and you don't have to force the emotion or force don't try to force it, because literally, if you go into the bone, go into the marrow, it begins to release what you're trying to express anyway, the emotion, and what weight is from pain or grief. You don't have to try to act like you're in pain or grief. You can start to allow the body to become like the clue. So the tracking was really important today. Tracking where things are occurring, when they're occurring, how they're occurring, and then can I repeat that as a performer? Can I let it be a trigger, a generator? So this has been a true gift, like an expansive gift.
Thank you. Yeah. And the body has limitless gifts, boy. It's like these are the bones, there's the organs and the fluids and the nervous system, and they all have their psychophysical gifts, which are so wonderful to explore. Yeah, it's great.
I was thinking of this it's kind of a banal example, but I was just getting my tires changed. And I actually was watching this guy. I was kind of amazed. This big, heavy, he was changing a tire on this big, heavy truck. He put the lever underneath, and then it was just like this. And it was this huge, heavy thing. And I remember, I was just yesterday, I was just standing there with my jaw dropped going, wow, that looks so effortless. And he's lifting.
Yeah, that's a great example. That's it. And we can, just as Sharon was showing with the arms, if we can get that with our feet too, like from the ground up, it's, powerful. We can really sequence it through all these, not just the quads, but through the whole system there. So yeah, great example. And then our muscles can really be balanced when they're working. Yeah. So working with the back bones repatterns the muscles, right? So when you work with the bones, the muscles are being repatterned. And I love the muscles, but I found that muscles are incredibly complex, like just unbelievably complex. Every way you turn in terms of gravity, they change function. So if you work with the bones, which are much easier and clear, and there's 206 of them, and you can, whatever, you are repatterning the muscles. It's just a much easier way than taking 2 years to do dissections or studying muscles. It's a lot harder. Yeah, well, I think we're going to call it a day, and thank you so much for being here. And let's see, I wanted to say, oh yeah, we're going to be doing a quickie with the organs on November 20th. Very similar to this, kind of bringing them into the patterns in that way. And yeah, and feel free, of course, if some of you haven't been able to join Wendell's class, whatever, you can always jump in and be working with these principles. There's no, you had to start from the beginning or anything. That's always open. And on our website, if you haven't seen it, there are bone examples of like improvisational, like riffing on the bones, besides some other systems. But if you just want to go, wow, yeah, I can take this into the creative process. I can work with this through movement. And there's a couple on there. I think they're labeled bone duets or things like that. So you could have a look at that. And I think that's it. So we welcome feedback. We welcome being in touch. We welcome communication, questions, thoughts. We love it all. And We hope we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's great to see you all.
Great to see you.
Really wonderful.
Thank you